there is definitely an inherent tension between local people who are hosts or business owners or who live in these areas and the pilgrims that flock to their homes.
Yes, absolutely. There is obviously the Camino de Santiago across Spain. They've developed that an awful lot, but there are still some areas where it's a bit harder to say find accommodation or something to eat, because some areas haven't benefited financially in the same way, and there's a bit of resentment there about that.
How did you become interested in pilgrimages?
Well, I started out as a historian of the Crusades about 20 odd years ago. And what really interests me is the motivation of why people do it and the effect it has on them back at home. So I wasn't necessarily interested in the politics of the Holy Land, the various battles and how all that works. I was interested in the Crusaders and what it meant to them. And so the sort of logical extension of that, because it's an armed pilgrimage, was looking at pilgrims and the same sort of things that influence them and the impact it had at home. So I was working on medieval Welsh pilgrimage, and so that developed into a discussion or a book on St Winifred's Well in Wales. But the more I looked at it, the more I sort of assumed that a lot of the modern things had been done. So the book on St Winifred's Well covers from the Middle Ages to the present day. And when I was doing the background research, I got to the modern stuff and thought, right, there'll be plenty of material for modern. So I'll just do the background research and then I can go and look in the archive. And the thing is, there wasn't. There are loads of works on contemporary experiences of pilgrimage, anthropology of pilgrimage, psychology of pilgrimage, all these sorts of things. But actually, if you're trying to understand the history of pilgrimage, say between 1900 and 1950, it's really piecemeal. And there's so much evidence. So having started off 20 years ago as a medievalist concentrating on Wales and crusading, I fell down the rabbit hole of just, why is nobody looking at all this stuff? It's amazing, and there's so much of it. And so that's what got me into pilgrimage. And yeah, I can just think of so many different things to do now.
Right. There are so many rabbit holes. It's never ending, isn't it?
I know.
I find this, I become very hyper fixated on one area and then discover something in a rabbit hole that it just leads one to another.
Yeah.
And I suppose this is also how your interest in returning soldiers and returning veterans kind of bumped into the interest in pilgrimage, or how did that happen?
Yes, well, again, that started off medieval. And I'd like to say there was a really neat sort of academic reason for me to do this. But essentially, some people in my department were doing a conference on medieval war trauma. And they said, we can't find anyone who does it for the Middle Ages. And I went, no, there isn't anyone. And sort of, that was that. And then they sort of just stared at me for quite a bit. And I went, oh, okay, I'll see if I can come up with something. So then I was looking at sort of combat trauma and the effects of war in the Middle Ages, which is another book. And one of the things that they quite often do is when people come back from military campaigns, they might go on a pilgrimage, or they go beforehand, or they might find a monastery. So there was a religious link there. And then I just started to look more modern just to see what there was, because I thought, well, maybe there are parallels, and realized, again, there was plenty of evidence, but nobody was looking at any of it. And it roughly coincided with the period when my husband, who is a veteran, decided to walk the Camino. And so we were looking quite a bit at the histories of that and the various programs they've got now, like Warriors to Lords. And so it's like the personal and the academic coincided on that one. And stirred my interest.
Can you give a couple of examples of the types of pilgrimages that soldiers returning from war, the types of pilgrimages that they went on during the Middle Ages, these medieval pilgrims?
We don't have great detail about them. They tend to be pilgrimages of thanks. So they might go on a pilgrimage to a site they already know, of a family monastery or a local shrine. And it doesn't say a great deal, as in they were troubled, so they went on pilgrimage, nothing like that. But you can read between the lines and you can see that that's what happened. Sometimes it will say they're giving thanks for coming home, but nothing more explicit than that, sadly, because the idea of veterancy isn't something that really exists in the Middle Ages, because the knightly class is always the knightly class. They'll be off to do something else again, I suppose. So it's not the same as it is in a modern context.
What was there a more formal type of even if it wasn't a pilgrimage per se, are there examples of formalized rituals or rites of passage at local shrines that seem to be kind of consistent across communities?
Not as far as we know, I don't think. A colleague of mine is actually really interested in rituals at shrines. That's something he wants to work on. So if we're looking at medieval things, the only things we've really got are where you get miracle accounts, and they might talk about what people do when they get to a shrine, largely that they want to get close to the relics of the saint that they've been to visit. So you get them praying, or sort of, you've seen shrines with those holes in them where you can insert body parts or crawl in, things like that. But we don't get nearly as much information on ritual as you might think. To go back, again to St. Winifred's Well, one of the things I tried to trace was ritual, because in the medieval hagiography, it says that St. Winifred's confessor and uncle, St. Bino, made a promise to her that anyone who appeals to her 3 times will receive an answer, and if not, then they just have to deal with it, basically. And that's all it really says, anyone who appeals to her 3 times. This was taken to mean visits her 3 times on pilgrimage. It's not actually what he said, and this morphs over time. 3 pilgrimages, 3 dips in the well, 3 circuits of the well. The 3 is obviously very important, but people interpret it differently, to the extent that the custodians have to say, you don't have to follow a ritual. It is not required. But you go and stand there now and watch people, and they all do it. So we don't really have it for the Middle Ages. They're really sketchy. And even where we do have it, people can't actually agree on what it is, but they all think they know, and they all think they know why they're doing something. But in the cases I've looked at, not necessarily. Other places perhaps a bit more. So some of the sites I've looked at globally, like in Karbala in Iraq, the soil around the martyr's grave, Hussein's grave, is considered sacred. So you understand why everyone's going up to that and taking it away. But in lots of places, unfortunately not. I think they're making up their rituals. As long as they mean
Certainly
something, I
the
suppose.
natural elements are important, aren't they? The water,
Yeah.
soil, moss, the stones. I'm definitely very interested in that in this site that I have been researching in Bellawood, and this fountain that has emerged as a very important shrine for people who are in the Marine Corps. And the elements are very important. And it's interesting to watch this evolve in real time, literally almost definitely year to year, but in some cases from month to month, there are changes in the rituals that are happening.
Is that because of seasonal changes? So you might be able to take a plant one month, not the next. Things like that.
It more has to do with what is being left at the fountain.
Okay.
So uniform insignia are now being left pinned into the stone, which is a new development. And the last time I was there, I happened to see this, and it was very remarkable, because up to this point, there weren't a lot of artifacts or identifying markers left at the shrine, but now this is starting to be a trend. So
that's interesting. Yeah, you do get sites. So one of us, where they leave crutches and medical devices, and they get cleared away in the middle of the 20th century because they've all gone a bit. They've kept some in the museum, but that practice didn't disappear. You can still find people hanging rosaries and things on the railings, but habits change. And I wonder how much of it is people go there and see something someone else has done and copy that for a while, and then someone comes up with something different. Yeah.
And social media is very important, because people are posting photos of themselves or of in this case the fountain or other places, and so then people want to emulate that. They think this is what pilgrims do, and so the rituals are happening and kind of evolving very quickly. And I think it has to do with this idea of being seen on social media, and then the next person in line wants to do the same thing that they saw, others do.
It's the idea of doing it properly, whatever that means.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes. There is no rule book, and yet everybody thinks there is. It's amazing.
Well, I think this is our internal drive towards religious structure. Even if we don't, sort of set out to say, I'm doing this for religious reasons. I think there's something deep in our psyche that wants to be a part of a structure, and we want to do it right and get it right and make sure that we are, sort of doing it right, doing it correctly.
Following the rules. And also, we know that these people went on this pilgrimage and they, let's say, were healed and they did this thing. So if I do the same thing, it's got to work
exactly
for me.
Right.
Yeah, yes. It's action and reward.
Yeah.